Okay, we call this talk Expanding Services for Campuses. And oops, I believe that you can see me toggle back and forth. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and as promised on Monday, we're going to talk about the bits and pieces on this slide. And we're going to talk about this by starting with the pools, then the entry point, and then the access point, and then the data stuff. And then wrap it up with the teaching and learning and facilitation. So let's start with the computing resource pool. In general, you should not have to operate their own pools, because we operate them for you, and you just join the pools that we operate. There's two notable exceptions, and the two notable exceptions are if you're a network of campuses that want to share resources across the network. In other words, if you have a bunch of institutions that want to collaborate and contribute to each other in kind to a common cause. We have those kinds of common cause arrangements via the science collaborations, but in principle, a state university network might have this kind of structure as well. And while I'm not sure that we have anybody in the campus community who does this today, this would be the kind of thing where we'd be open to. And of course, then you'd have your own pool, and we'd talk about whether or not we operate it for you. And the other example is if you're looking for advice on how to deploy your own local cluster, for example, via HG Condor, then we would be talking about with you about operating a resource pool. And if this is something that is part of your objective, then talk with us, and we provide advice appropriate to your specific circumstances. With the general philosophy, we try to do whatever you need and then help you with advice to get it done. The second item of services, types of services, the compute entry point. And this is for contributing your local cluster or cloud into an existing pool. For example, the Open Science Pool. The requirements for doing this is that you have to have outgoing network from the cluster nodes. So if your cluster is entirely on a private network with no access whatsoever to the outside world, not even a NAT, then that we can't help you. That's basically then, and this can't be integrated. NATing is perfectly acceptable. So you can be on a private network, but NATed to the outside world. We can work with this. However, no outside connectivity, that just doesn't work. Then in addition to this, you need it to provide OSG with an account on your cluster that has access to your batch system and is accessible by an SSH key. We will then run for you the OSG hosted CE and integrate this with your batch cluster, and therefore make your instantiate this compute entry point. If you furthermore want to maximize use and reduce network impact, you should be installing Singularity and support this, because the vast majority of our user communities at this point, in one way or the other, require Singularity. And so that is an installation and concern that basically containers rule the world. In addition, there is the possibility to provide software for data caches, and we then take care of the rest. And the details, all the gory details of how this gets done, can be found at this URL at the bottom here. Next is the access point, and I'm handing it over to Lauren.
Yeah, so what your researchers as a campus might be more interested in, of course, is their ability to run computational work and access data, not just that OSG provides, but that the Path project provides or that you provide. And just to review the functions of an access point as introduced in some of our presentations yesterday, access points are frequently servers, but really the server where users can log in. So they provide accounts for people and define their privileges. And then access points are defined by managing job execution across configured resources, configured for that access point. So we'll talk in a second about OSG Connect. That's OSG's service providing access points into the open science pool. However, those access points and any others can also aggregate resources from other sources like other pools in the Open Science Compute Federation, a local cluster, national resources, commercial cloud. And we talked a little bit about some of that yesterday, especially in some Q&A from Marone's presentation. Additionally, a local HT Condor cluster's access points that submit default into that local cluster can be configured to integrate with the Open Science pool or these other resources. You can integrate access to locally staged data if you operate your own access point. And certainly the OSG Connect access points integrate data storage for users who don't have a local access point. You can also manage then data access across resources, and we'll talk in a bit about operating your own data origin, which can be something that you operate together or that can be operated separately from an access point. But you can basically export local data into the OSDF that's associated with your access point through a data origin and expose other data in the OSDF that the user has access to. And many institutions just send their researchers to OSG Connect, which is great. That's what the OSG Connect service is for if they're working on a US-based research project. So most campuses are not pursuing their own local access points, but if you're interested in that, just talk to us and we can provide advice and services tailored to your specific circumstances, including who hosts what components and what configuration will be necessary. Next slide, please.
Oops.
And just to provide a little bit more detail about the OSG Connect service, beyond providing access points, again, for US-based projects, it has data storage associated with it, just like any access point can, including storage in a data origin that is specific to OSG Connect, but accessible through the Open Science Data Federation. We have our team of research computing facilitators who I lead that provide personalized onboarding for every new user on OSG Connect. We're the ones who do email-based support ongoingly and provide virtual office hours twice weekly. And you're all invited to join us at our regular user office hours this afternoon. If you're interested, check out your email for conference links to find the URL for that. And that will take place immediately following the discussion sessions later this afternoon. So there's documentation that you can find online, plenty of software solutions, and otherwise our facilitators are happy to help with other softwares that we don't have documented. And we provide regular user training, all listed under that documentation link. We also love to co-facilitate alongside campus staff. So if you're supporting researchers at your local campus, you can get an account on OSG Connect. We're certainly not restrictive about that. And you can be involved to the extent that you desire in any of these sort of facilitation aspects of supporting researchers on your campus to use the Open Science pool through OSG Connect. Next slide.
Yeah, let me stress on that last line. I would love to see people respond to NSF solicitations with desires, with adding facilitation support for their communities to work with us. We'd love to train people who then we'd love to train the trainers and therefore scale. We talked on Monday about the fundamental challenge in reaching our objective of growing by another order of magnitude. And that fundamental objective of scaling up by another magnitude really requires that we're not the only ones training people, because our resources will not be sufficient to train people across 4,000 campuses. That's just completely out of the question. And so for people to be creative, come up with strategies that build on what we do would be very much appreciated. And so so working with us, if you want to take us up on this, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and in fact, one of our speakers after this presentation will talk a bit about how he has co-facilitated researchers. We've also worked with some other campuses who have repurposed some of our training materials, which are all publicly available, whether from the OSG school that I'll talk about in a bit, or our regular user training. And so we're very open to people remixing and matching.
now we go talk about data. You've seen the two slides that come next already yesterday. And so it's we offer the data origin service. A data origin service allows you to export whatever your file system is, or whatever fractions of the namespace on your file system that you want to export via a service into the data federation. The notion here is that we run the service in a container at your location. The container has to be running on a piece of hardware that has access to, that can mount your file system and can see the outside world. And so, and if your file system is behind a firewall, that means this piece of hardware has to be dual homed. It has to be accessible via some kind of Kubernetes infrastructure. And we can talk details in the Q&A if you want. We actually have partners that offer these kinds of things that will allow you not, so that you don't need to run the K8s, but somebody else runs it for you, and so forth. And via this mechanism, it ought to be really straightforward for you to export what you have into the data federation and therefore make your data available. Then once you have a data origin, you have choices to make. You have the choice first to make between what part of your total namespace do you want to export and how much of it is allowed to be accessed by whom. So there's the public or the private. Anything goes, meaning you can have some sections that are totally public, some sections that are private, some sections that are writable. And all of this is a decision that you make and that you can change in principle any moment, because you control what you export. We just run this service here that then makes whatever is visible to us visible to the federation. And that gets us to how is it visible from the compute nodes? It's visible from the applications via the caches. OSG and partners operate regional data caches across the data federation. If we haven't already deployed a cache in your region, we're likely to do so in 2022. I'll talk more about this tomorrow, but as to the best, I believe that we're adding in the neighborhood of 9 or 10 more caches in 2022 to the infrastructure. And where by the end of 2022, we have more or less a cache from every single location in the continental United States within a 500-mile distance. So no place in the United States will be further away than 500 miles from a cache, or almost no place. And you'll see more about this discussed in the talk that I'll be giving tomorrow. If you're concerned that you have a large site with limited network connectivity, talk with us and we discuss options, because we can operate a cache for you in a very similar way that we can operate an origin for you. And I'm giving back to Lauren.
Yeah, so beyond the regular user training I already mentioned, there are other opportunities to learn more if you're interested, not just in terms of running work on, say, the Open Science Pool or Condor systems as represented in the OSG User School, but also in presentations and trainings that are more specifically for staff at campuses. But first, the OSG User School I mentioned because we have applications opening soon for what we're hoping is a return to in-person programming resuming for this summer, 2022. The school itself will be the last week of July, but basically watch out for emails coming, and I'm sure we'll send them to all registrants of the all hands meeting announcing when applications are open. That is a week-long program. Like I mentioned, it's for researchers and staff who support their computing needs, and you'll hear later from Bennett Faber, who's research computing staff at the University of Michigan and attended an OSG school in the past. We also do a number of presentations and trainings hosted by ourselves, like DHTC campus workshops I've linked to, external presentations and trainings at other community gatherings. And in addition to the user office hours that I mentioned earlier, we'll also have site admin office hours today after the discussion sessions. Again, you'll find the links to that or the URL to that in the email you received with links for the all hands meeting this week. Next slide. And just to summarize, for most campuses, an OSG hosted CE and a data origin, which you also don't need to host yourself, are sufficient for full integration into OSG. Your users can, through an OSG Connect access point, run work, say on the Open Science Pool, with data from your local campus through a data origin available to their computations. Or they certainly through OSG Connect have access to the data origin we provide. But you can share resources, you can help your users take advantage of the computing resources aggregated through OSG and the data resources aggregated through our data federation, really with just working with us to help us make sure that those services are configured well to integrate your campus. We mentioned local access points that are available to support additionally local user identity and more seamless integration of local data resources such that they could be like mounted to the access point. And otherwise, you can still just send researchers to OSG Connect if you're not yet interested in running your own access point. And additionally, it's maybe unlikely that you need or want to run your own pool, but certainly for the cases we mentioned earlier, get in touch. And for any of these things, especially because some of them are, as we mentioned, based upon personalized discussion of what is right for your situation. You may not find them in our training materials, but do get in touch with us via our support email address to talk more about them. Thank you.
And I think that last point is worth emphasizing. Don't assume that something can't be done because it's not documented. A fundamental of OSG is that the number of ways that you can use our technologies is vast. There's no point in documenting all of it for general consumption, simply because it is just too diverse. And so what we have documented tend to be things that people have asked for explicitly and has been asked for multiple times explicitly. And so just because something isn't documented doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so always, if you have a question, come to us and we work with you, and maybe you'll be the ones that will then lead to documentation of something that wasn't documented before, but can easily be done. And now open for questions.